against Starvo. And, you know, if you can just kind of withstand it early, as we're running into the game right now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the top. Yeah, heck yeah, we are. It's top 8 of the Calling in Taiwan. My name is Flank. I'm joined by Armada. And just want to sort of complete that thought real quick. That what the initial assessment of a 60-40 favorite or even a 55-45 for Prism, I think was not the case. I think at best it was still a 50-50. Yeah. So, you know, maybe there was a little bit too much stock where that was essentially erased by Starvo players making it happen. But here we go. It's time to play.
And looking like we have a nice little Starvo versus the one Vis that cut in to the top 8. Starting things off, drawing things up. Let's see how this goes on turn number 0. I guess electing to go first or just ending up losing the die roll and then being told to go first is the Viserai player.
So looking at the equipment here, again, standard procedure, I think, for both players, obviously. Lots of blocking capabilities there on the Viserai side. Skullcap, Scaletta, the Grasp, and starting it out pretty decently. Going to start just, you know, I guess poking away with Vexing Malice with a little bit of a chaser on top, two Arcane with that 1 damage.
Yeah, playing Mordred Tide into Vexing is a really fun little starting play. It's one of those interesting moments too where if you start with Vis, like you actively are incentivized to just make rune chants and not do anything. But in Starvo, there's this, you know, into Starvo, there's this general belief, like an overarching game plan that you do want to try and remove cards from hand and make it a little more difficult for them to hit the consistent Starvo trigger. And so when you're putting this, yeah, that is a very large D20 showing the damage that is coming across, which we can all appreciate on stream.
We definitely appreciate this big time. And yeah, Sink Below is being pitched here to go ahead and, I guess, absorb some of that arcane damage, if I'm not mistaken, as it seems like that, yeah, the Sink was, I mean, there was 2 arcane being presented, so 1 should trickle through here.
And as they play out, there's a clear block and then a pass overall. No extra play there. There's no go again on that, so you'd have to creepers and you know, follow that up with something afterwards in order to get a go again. But I guess in that scenario, you're pretty content to just make a few rune chants off of perhaps a suboptimal Mordred Tide turn, you know?
This is a tough turn here for Yenwei. I mean, Yenwei has to pitch a lot of very powerful cards. There's a Crippling Crush and Oakenold. Just to get that Spinal Crush through, there's no fuse here, but it's a 9, stopping any go again effects on a Crush. A Crush obviously being if 4 or more damage goes through. No Dominate, no go again, but Steve, look at the cards that were pitched away. A Crippling Crush and an Oakenold. These are cards that you wish that you can hang tight with and maybe hold on to Arsenal perhaps so you can, you know, couple it up with a fuse later on. That was a pretty clunky way to start your offensive turn.
It's not the best, but you can also make the argument that maybe you're trying to play for a second cycle. Maybe you think you can get there if your opponent's just going to like kind of tit for tat you overall. He's going to just be content to straight up pass here, drawing up, playing what is probably a more defensive style, and that allows a nice little, unfortunately, it allows just a very powerful little Crippling Crush, dominated go again, probably no resources floating here, but just a casual 13 dominate.
Yeah, and on the Crush effect here, you're going to be basically taxing your opponent an additional 2 cards, which is going to be tough. That's where these cards are so important, because it's not necessarily about doing damage as Starvo, as, you know, the vanilla 9 of hitting a fused Autumn's Touch, let's say, is not as challenging to digest as a Crippling Crush or an Oakenold. Those on-hit effects that really just tax your hand, that peel away cards, that for that OTK strategy that Viserai might be looking to employ, you cannot, you know, you need to be able to play 3 or 4 card hands to really generate that kind of you know, rune chant stack so that you're able to come through. But that is a big time unmovable and a reduce out of the arsenal as well.
And this is what I've noticed overall about the Viserai lists that we've seen on stream for the past 2 days, is that they are far more defensive minded. They're playing unmovables like red unmovables. They're playing reduced to rune chance. They're definitely more oriented towards the OTK strategy straight up, which means that they are okay seeing something like a crippling crush and blocking from hand with like a defense reaction, and then blocking from arsenal with a defense reaction, and then maybe on their turn playing a single rune chant generator, or just content to say, pass arsenal another defense reaction and try to just make it happen again. It feels very much like old school Viserai trying to push for that OTK turn, like way back in the day with like Crucible of War.
I believe that's a Starvo fuse in hand with Oakenold, if possible here. I think it looks like everything's going well here. This is probably just going to be, again, building up a few things. He's going, actually, it's the OTK plan is not what's on the docket here, it seems.
Yeah, here he's choosing to try to return volley, try to, push some life totals down. It's actually interesting taking this line of sort of trading damage, trying to get cards out of hand is what we didn't see happen in the final game of Swiss, where the Viserai player tried to just defense react from arsenal and from hand to stop all these, and the Starvo player just hit Oakenold fused into Oakenold fused into Crippling Crush fused into Oakenold fused and blew the game up. So maybe this is a strategy after watching a game like that, or hearing about a game like that, of like, maybe we just need to rip cards from hand and try to keep parity as far as life totals are concerned.
Yeah, in this case, Yenwei, with the cards that he's holding right now, it's like, yeah, send me the bill, no problem, because watch this. It's going to be slam it down, fuse the Starvo. He's already saying, he's like, check this out. All right, I'm going to show you two cards. It's a beautiful cold foil pulse, if you've ever seen one. That's the full effect right there. And now we're going to pitch that lightning and come in with a fused Oakenold. That Pulse of Eisenloft is basically your bread and butter for Starvo.
Yeah, and that is a huge play. It's literally the play that makes this deck, right? This is the reason, one of the two or three reasons that this deck is just so powerful, so good at what it does. It's being able to just play out a fused Oakenold and say your hand is gone.
Well, that's it. And this is the thing. When you're talking about trading volleys, the volley that Yenwei absorbed, the damage that he took, the 7 points of damage, it means nothing because it's just points. It's a resource like anything else, like your pitch, like anything. Your life total can go down to 1. And that means that as long as you got 1, you've got a hand to play, you got a chance. And in this case, for Ming Chen, this volley, this return fire has so much more detriment because of the on-hit effect.
Yeah, I'm choosing to keep the pulse in hand. Probably wants to set up another big turn, being able to basically just fuse Starvo trigger on the next turn, knowing that you've just crippled the hand of your opponent, and so that you can just be content not to push for 4 extra damage, but to just show the Starvo trigger and then just jam something else down. Because if you just, draw into another crazy big power card, then you just have the chance to run away with the game. Here it's just an evergreen from Arsenal.
This is where, those regional metas that we began the broadcast talking about is so, comes into play, because if the common logic and the climate of where you're playing suggests that OTK is not the flavor of the day, it's not the strategy that people are taking, that's where a Starvo player will put something like a Sink Below in their deck. Because where I'm from, in my neck of the woods, this common strategy, the common logic to beating Starvo as Viserai has always been OTK. So cards like Sink Below never really got they got no value. They were just dead red cards because I was never getting attacked. So in this case, this is definitely a call of the local meta. And if for some who might see that and say, that's unorthodox, well, it's unorthodox to you perhaps in your own region, but for Yenwei reading the runes of where he's at, that's what he's assuming. And now this is what we're seeing as Ming Chen here on Viserai is playing that game of slapsies back and forth.
He just full took everything that was thrown at him, blocking with no cards from hand or arsenal, so that he could play out a turn. Looks like he's going to play the Aura down, of which the name fleetingly leaves my mind at 1:42 a.m. But that's okay, because I could always look it up later. Or someone awesome in chat can mention the name of the card. Oh, he's playing out Sonata. So keeping the entirety of his hand so that he can try to set up a Sonata turn, or at least just some overarching value that, again, tries to pull cards from hand. He's going to hit Sonata and unfortunately only hit one non-attack action, so he can select one attack action and send one arcane damage over to his opponent.
Still has another pulse in hand as well, as I believe that's Blizzard. I think that's in there as well.
Yeah, he's kept both. Well, he's kept the pulse of Volthaven in hand for the past 2 turns. He drew into that second pulse as well, and does have a Blizzard. So he's certainly has another fuse set up, and I guess he could use it on that break ground if he chooses to, or whatever he has in arsenal. He's going to Crown of Seeds instead. But he's looking at a Dread Triptych coming at him, which could create some rune chance, depending on if it hits.
Yeah, the Dread Triptych has so many lines of text there, Steve. Just walk us through a little bit about what that nastiness can really, account for.
Sure.
If it fires on all cylinders.
Right. If it does all of its things, it can create 3 rune chance, and that's before you look at anything like Mordred or Viserai. He's instead, look, this is interesting. He's going to play out his Read the Runes red from hand, arsenal a card, and then choose to end the turn. Thank you, everyone in chat that shouted out that is Rune Blood Incantation. I should have gone with my gut, but then for some reason I almost said Blood Spill Invocation, which is the other card from Arcane Rising that no one plays, sadly, because it's got cool art. He's going to come down with Starvo trigger here and just drop the break ground that he had from hand for a measly 7.
But it's dominated, and it goes again, Steven. And that's the beautiful part, is that the dominated, it's not just that it's 7. And 7 is one of those break points. Obviously, multiples of 3 plus 1 are always nasty, nasty little bits to block. But it's dominated, so you're guaranteed to, at least punch through for a little bit here. It seems like this has been Yenwei's game the whole way, as Ming Chen has opted to come through here to try to see if they can trade blows back and forth. But, even as this game began, with Yenwei pitching a Crippling Crush and an Okanold, he's followed up with a fused Crippling Crush with a double fused Okanold, and just has continuously gone to town here. Not to mention, there's still the Stalagmite is still fully charged. You've got all of your blocking with your Crater Fist. If necessary, you are in real good cruise control here for Yenwei.
Yes, this is in commanding lead, and you're looking at the life totals as well, and you go, well, this is a big stretch, and you're going to have to put something pretty big together if you are sitting on the Viserai side of the table. Do keep in mind, though, that you can block with all of your equipment still. All that equipment block is still set up, so if you can generate some rune chance and survive some damage, you might be able to pull something out. But it looks like, unfortunately, that you may be having to face down against a Crippling Crush, perhaps fused over the next couple of turns, or I should say Starvo fused. And it does appear that there's a big attack coming across, just for the 9, no Dominate, I would imagine, because he is not indicating that it's coming for 11. But you did force a card out of your opponent's hand prior to this by playing the beautiful foil Polar Blast.
I think it's a Winter's Bite.
Oh, Winter's Bite, excuse me, yes.
And that's not a bad block here. Again, that's going to block 6, and that's going to negate the crush effect of that Spinal Crush, meaning that there's the go-agains can happen. And you can see here by just going ahead and tossing out all that equipment that he's valuing his hand, but more so, this is also potentially an indicator that Skeleton, that Bloodsheath Skeleton can be, it's now online. Typically, you want to get the 2-point block before you pop it. Is 8 rune chance enough to get things going? I think that's a Sonata that's in his arsenal, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, playing down a Become the Arknight. If you can somehow string together Become the Arknight, Mordred tied into some dirty little Sonata stuff that could maybe steal you a bunch of points of damage, force cards out of the hand, you might be able to swing some things. And that is definitely a line of play. This is one of those cards that I absolutely love, simply because there's so many different decision points that can reward you for taking the specific line. Become the Arknight, he chooses to discard the Dread Triptych so that he can go and get a Mordred Tide, and I would imagine that he's going to follow up playing the non-attack action card that he started with by playing Mordred Tide and generating a rune chant, and then just jam down a bunch more stuff that can do bad stuff for your opponent.
Oh, here it comes, baby. Here it comes. I just noticed that my my logo is is unfortunately blocking this young man's face here. So this was not how it was supposed to be. So I'm just going to make a little bit of an adjustment here.
And
I did not mean to do that.
Sonata play comes down as you're moving the logo. The perfect timing.
I was going to say, I don't know if you could see it, but we're going to, you know what, we're just going to get rid of it altogether. I don't need that kind of vanity. It's the real heroes are on the board. I apologize that I didn't even know that was there. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I mean, there's that big turn that we're talking about. There's a complete just pocket full of rune chance.
Let's see how the reveal goes. Reveal for 8. And it's fairly even, which is solid. So he's going to get 3 attack actions, send over 3 arcane damage, banish the Sonata, and then be able to push some of this damage. Looks like he has a Rune Flash available to him. I can't quite make out the other 2 cards. Maybe you can. Perhaps a Spellblade Assault as well. Not sure what colors we see. Depending on the resources that he can generate, he can definitely push some damage here.
Well, this is usually how this goes. The Starvo versus Viserai matchup typically looks very one-sided until the Viserai gets those pieces ready to go. It's just kind of building that house of cards and then eventually just toppling it over onto your opponent. So this is that turn. So that 29 to 10 is going to evaporate very, very. It's going to equalize. As I have been, strapped into a match where I was up 40-1 as Starvo versus Viserai, and that game ended 1-0. So keep in mind that anything could happen, but this is the swing back. This is that clap back that Ming Chen is taking here.
And this is exactly what you have to play for if you are the Viserai player, because there is no other way besides building up a turn like this, finding a Become the Arc Knight, chaining it with something like a Mordred Tide so you're generating double rune chance. Playing out a Sonata off of the back of a Skeleton. This is the only real way you cut into a deficit like this, and he's executing it as you see. And of course, the block here with the Stalagmite will generate a Frostbite and make it a little bit more difficult to pay for things. But of course, he can dance around that with the help of Rune Flash.
I was gonna say, I think there's just some trigger timing regarding the Frostbite perhaps there, but take a look at that. There's 5 more rune chance coming through, and the scores now as Yanwei on Starvo at 16 to Ming Chen's 10. This is a completely different story than merely 5 minutes ago when it was a landslide as it seemed here. But if you look at this absolute just this laundry list of cards that have been accumulating on the board. This is all from one turn, and it's impressive to say the least. But this is the power of what Viserai can do. Eventually, you feel like you're in this comfortable spot until Viserai eventually just explodes on you, and that's precisely what's going on right now.
Yeah, and this is a turn where the Starvo player, Yanwei, really wants to keep his hand. You can see there's an Oakenold in there. Probably not a fuse target from what it looks like. It looks like there's a beautiful alt art Channel Lake Frigid plus a couple of ice cards and like a Glacial in hand. So you're not fusing here, but you want to have tempo, but you can't die. Now, in this scenario, you're probably not being like presented lethal, so you may just be able to take down to as low as you can. And if you are playing as Viserai, then you're thinking, I just need to do something to rip cards out of hand so that I don't have to face down a possible fuse. Now, of course, he doesn't know if there's, the fuse pieces, so you just do whatever you can to actually take cards from hand in awkward, presentations of damage.
This could just be, like you said, absorb as much as possible. That's a pretty decent way to do it. Again, absorbing a lot of the rune chance coming in. Now, this is the super value combo meal. It's 2 physical plus 2 rune chance plus 2 arcane. So you're getting everything here. As one of those representations there is actually 2 arcane. I think they're switching that up here just so there's no confusion. Yeah, there it is. So 2 physical, 2 arcane plus 2 rune chance. That's 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1.
1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Movie reference. If anyone gets it in chat, you're my favorite person. It's a lot of damage, though. Wouldn't you agree, Flake?
I completely agree. And I believe that right now, given the fact that you're mentioning, in terms of valuing the cards, there was no fusion there. So I think that's part of it, especially if you were able to fuse with the Oakenold. Yanwei's approach here would have been, am I dead? If I'm not, I'm holding the hand and I'm going ham, because I don't think that Ming Chen would have been able to catch up here. But I believe at this point, what he's looking to do here is merely swing hammer and pocket that the Oakenold and hope that the drawback is is pretty decent.
Yeah, both
So
players, I think, playing fantastically and playing towards those lines that you're mentioning. I think you're 100% correct as they clean up that massive turn, as you sometimes see, Viserai have those crazy, crazy turns.
So one counter on the stalagmite, and that stalagmite is going to be incredibly vital. So there it is. Yeah, we're going to pitch that beautiful, beautiful alternate art Channel Lake Frigid. I have one of those. I didn't even know that it came in alternate art until I almost traded it to someone, and someone said, "Oh, it's the alternate art." I said, "Okay, trades off." I did not. I wasn't aware. But there it is. So again, the Okinold is now in the pocket, which means that if that that draw is beautiful, but that's 3 lightning cards in hand. That is not, and you could see a little bit of that frustration as he kind of just with his hand gestured, like, what do I have to do here? What do I have to do?
And we see a Rattlebones in hand for Ming Chen, possibly considering playing. He's going to check his graveyard as well. There's a ton of lines with Viserai. Viserai is very complex in nature as far as some of these cards that can go and tutor cards out of the deck, or pull cards from graveyard, can be played at instant speed if you deal arcane damage first. All of these things that you have to consider and weigh your options for, and what your hand can do at any given moment, especially because you can like spellbound creepers things at different times depending on your instant speed plays. All of these things lead to a scary moment here for Yinwei if you're looking at this going, okay, if he's looking at his graveyard, is he just looking to count like how many Mordreds he has left? Or is he looking because he has a Rattlebones that he's going to pull something out of, and do I have to now account for that? And there's, depending on the rest of the composition of his hand, there's a variety of things that you can actually go and search out in this moment, which is very scary.
What's tough here also is that, like, Yenwei is just assessing the situation and opting to block out, pocket the Okinold in the hopes that he'll draw into that Starvo and then basically kind of end the game. But drawing into 3 lightning cards, and honestly, when it comes down to it, lightning is typically your weakest element as Starvo. It's not the most powerful for attacking, as something like an Autumn's Touch would do. Like a red, you could pitch it for 7. At least it's a decent attack in itself. I don't even think he's holding on to an ice card to really get any value out of that hammer. So this is going to be another blockout turn, I'm assuming, for Yenwei, and hopefully he just draws into something better. But this is not bad coming in. As you mentioned, Rattlebones into a Swarming Gloomveil for 4 and go again with a Rune Chant Chaser on top.
Yeah, floating a resource with a card. I think it's at least 1 card in hand, which means that if he can, at instant speed, do some tricky stuff and then chain this together into... I think with 1 card in hand, he probably can't do too many things, but with the idea being that if I can create 3 Rune Chants and get this to hit, then I can push arcane damage over the top that you can't stop. And that is a threat that may be more paper in nature than, real and actual that you have to consider. But it's one that you're making your opponent do the math on. And if they do it wrong after a long 2 days of playing, you may get an extra advantage over the course of this game.
So our R&B cover band, our R&B hip hop cover band, which is only going to cover Naughty by Nature songs, we're going to be called Paper by Nature. I think that's are going to be our like CCG kind of little project.
What, you and me?
Musical project. Well, I figured, I mean, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, it's all 5 dudes, right? So we need 3 other people involved. We'll figure it out. But
we can come up with 3 people. There's probably like 3 people in both of our chats combined.
I think so.
There's at least 3 people, right, in chat.
I mean, maybe in yours. No, I got some great people in here as well. Definitely some awesome people. I want to give a shout out to I Am Bubbles and John, as well as Obama Snow. Great people here. You guys are awesome.
Obama Snow. There's a Pokemon in chat? That's
Obama
amazing.
Snow? I don't know if is that a Pokemon? I'm not entirely sure. I mean,
correct me if I'm wrong, chat. I'm pretty sure that is. Pushing the 2 and 2 with the Rosetta here, which again pushing some extra arcane damage, making it really uncomfortable because you're stripping cards from hand. You don't know. We can see to a certain degree what's in the Starvo player's hand, but anytime you can pull cards out of their hand and make them pitch or block, you're keeping that, especially when you saw them pitch away both of the pulses early, you're keeping that chance of just getting blown out by dominated attacks way down.
So again, a blink in hand is nothing really. I mean, that's just pitch fodder right now. If you got to get rid of some of that that arcane damage, there's nothing in the arsenal because that there was an early use, frankly, of that crown of seeds. So this 2-2 is going to at least connect for one, as there's going to be one arcane that's going to be able to trickle through. You can block it again with the null rune boots. But the question here is, I think it's just a matter of Yenwei knows that his hand is kind of little lackluster. So it's a matter of just trying to piece together. Can I, block out, but still manage to, let's say, swing hammer or swing with something and keep a card in arsenal? Because I believe that he's in this position now at 7 life, where being able to consistently have a Crown of Seeds ability on defense is going to be clutch.
And here we have an awakening play. He's taking damage so that he can then fuse an awakening and create some seismics. Oh, and it's going to be a big seismic creation.
That's going to be, that's 10 seismics.
Yeah. Going to be the way that you kind of sneak back in that game as, again, you're having to just throw cards. You're having to block. Going to go in and consider what you grab here. Again, you have 10 seismics, and now you have a little bit of room to play with as you go back through the deck. My chat just wanted to let everybody know that yes, Abomasnow is a Pokemon, and yes, it says, or it's Sev would like to join our R&B band. So put him down.
Awesome. I'm Justin Timberlake. That's just that's already been called. So I'm the Beyonce. If anyone's asking, you could be Kelly Rowland. That's a whole other group.
Absolute clutch play here to have this awakening. It's the clutch card, I should say it that way, because it's the play that you want to make, of course, where you take enough damage where you generate some mass amounts of seismics because you already had the fuse in hand, and then he chooses to pull a crippling crush here, which he can, I would imagine, set up a fuse for. I can't remember the other cards in hand, but either way, he's going to be able to play down a crippling on top of all this.
Well, there's a blink in hand and there's an earth card in hand, so it's not really.
There's not a third one then.
There's there's nothing else going on here. But at the very least, you're getting a crippling crush in a situation where, I don't think that Ming Chen can actually. He's gonna have to commit cards here. What does he have in hand here that can block? You got the birthday cake in there. Trying to figure out what else is just floating around. I believe there's another Sonata, but 11 coming through. Again, it's not a pure on hit. It's a crush effect, meaning it's got to do 4 or more damage. But 11 is quite the big piece of pie that you've got to take a bite out of here in order to make sure that you're not getting your hand taxed. But in order to do that, you got to give cards away. So this might just be buying the entire hand here, perhaps. As if you look, there's really no other blocking from the equipment available, as that Arcanite Skullcap is offline. Yenwei is at the lower life total here.
Yeah, you can consider throwing like creepers, but you don't really need to based on the block distribution of your hand. Oh, and he comes in with the blink, allowing him to gain the action point, and then I would imagine just jam that hammer across.
Now I'm wondering if that is. I mean, it's not an ice hammer, but I don't think it really matters at this point. But is that 4 vanilla damage worth the arsenal? In my opinion, as you've basically already bought the hand out here, is that worth it? I mean, obviously you play the blink and you pitch and go. So you're I guess so in the same regard that you're holding on to extra. It's tough. It's a tough assessment here.
I think that's a solid point or a solid question to ask. But if you are buying the hand, then you're having yourself most likely a second turn because they have an arsenal plus 1 card. And if you steal that 1 card with this 4 attack hammer, then they have an arsenal, right? Which is very unlikely that they play anything out there that's gonna threaten lethal. So by pushing this damage, you're pushing vanilla damage, and you're not really worried about Crown of Seedsing for some extra block. If you don't buy it, then maybe you're opening yourself up to some weird fringe lines that could push weird arcane damage, like a Sonata. I don't know. And there's a Sonata. He Sonatas for nothing and ends up hitting the Sonata, grabbing himself a little swarming Gloom Veil, sending 1 arcane damage.
It is 1 arcane damage that comes through. He could potentially block it, but it's going to cost him a card. He's got a Sink Below ready to go to block out that swarming Gloom Veil if necessary, as there's really no follow-up, I don't think, right? Because it's that's the only card he's got left in hand, if I'm not mistaken. There's an
Yeah,
Arsenal still to
Arsenal
be
plus the
had.
card, that's right. And it is a
But
0 cost, which is beneficial to what you actually grab there if you want to actually play that card, or maybe you wanted the resources, so, grabbing a red is unfortunate. Looks like
okay,
he's just
so
mauve skies down.
there goes another, and he's just coming through here. And I mean, it's 4 + 1 chaser here, but that can be just very easily answered. You can see it right away. It's like, yeah, all right, jam it through. I'll just take the. I believe he just took the 1.
Yep.
Yep. So
Which is
it's,
very smart, actually, to take the 1 here, because that puts your life total at equal, turning off the skull cap as well. And this is one of those end game things that if you don't practice a little bit, or just get yourself exposed to, of just managing skull cap block capability at the end of the game, is absolutely huge in these high level games. And we've seen it time and time again, some player being able to take just enough damage to turn off someone else's skull cap and come across. It's not quite the same in this matchup, but it still matters because you're presenting some amount of lethal to your opponent here in this moment.
And this is a brilliant turn right here, pitching the yellow pulse, dropping down a Channel Lake Frigid, following up with another channel pitched in order to swing hammer. So you're already getting taxed if you want to come in with a D-react, as the Channel Lake Frigid is going to, basically act as a consistent frostbite effect. And now you have to also contend with another hammer. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2 reduced to rune chants have been played. I could be wrong.
It looks like there's 1 in hand currently, and that's a fairly uncomfortable feeling, because now you have to pay 1 for it, I should say, because you do have a rune chant, which means it's reduced by that, but you don't have more than 1 rune chant, so you do have to pay for it because of Channel Lake Frigid, which is an awkward thing.
So just the old-fashioned block, dropping some cards there to go ahead and block it through. 1 flow counter on the Channel Lake Frigid, and very adeptly mentioned here in chat was the fact that those sync belows have come in incredibly clutch. What was initially, pegged as kind of like an unorthodox choice in this particular matchup has that those cards have come in pretty clutch. Those are typically tough cards to draw as Starvo, as they don't fuse, they don't pitch for 3. They're really only defensive. But in this case, the call was made to have those in the list, and they have come through quite fruitfully.
Yeah, and if you're expecting to see, a lot of rune blades in general in the meta, playing 4 block defense reactions are generally pretty solid, because Rune Blade fundamentally wants to push breakpoints, and split damage. A lot of those cards that they push out there push for 4 damage and have go again and try to go wide. It's that breakpoint that you want to attack, and this is the reason that you see those, Sync Belows and perhaps Fate for Scenes and other decks put in work.
I've been in the situation here where Yenwei's sitting, where you have the game in your grasp and you're like, just get me that fuse. Just get me that fuse and it's over. Just get me that fuse and it's over. And it seems to be that he's just, it's like you had the game almost in the bag about 4 or 5 turns ago where you drew the 3 lightning cards. I have sat in that particular situation and just stewed and been like, man, okay, we still got some work to do. It's not just a free pass to victory here, as the cards that he's drawn now, again, I don't want to say seem clunky, as they're pretty potent, but the problem is just stringing together multiple turns. I think the only thing that you can really hope for here, I didn't really get a view, but if there's a blink and another ice card, you can blink and then swing hammer, and that might be somewhat good enough. There's the other reduced to rune chant that you're talking about.
This was the one that he arsenaled on the last turn. And again, he does have to pay for this reduced to rune chant. Promo reduced to rune chant, because it is that full, what is that? Extended art. That's the correct term for it. He's going to block 4 there, and I would imagine take down. Did he take down to 1 here? Was that, or was that a blue evergreen? I couldn't quite make out what that was. Nevertheless.
No. That was 7 that went through, blocked it, going down to 1.
Took down to 1. And this does clear the Channel Lake Frigid, so perhaps he just says, I'm going to take down to 1 because I have a hand. And that's exactly what we see here. Man, he's going to push some Swarming Gloomveil action, creating 2 on the back end.
Very important here, keep in mind, is that there's a go again on the Swarming Gloomveil, but there's still a Stalagmite. So depending on what the card is in hand, if it's a red card in hand, the Stalagmite creating the Frostbite will turn off any ability for you to swing with that Rosetta. So there is a potential thought process here where if Yenwei is putting Ming Chen on a red card, blocking Stalagmites shuts off any of the additional swing. So we'll see if that's what he's assuming here. I did not see what the other card Ming Chen is holding on to, but that's a consideration here.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see how he chooses to block or, approach this portion, because he does have to block here. He's basically just forced. I think he takes 1 rune chant, dropping him to 3, does full block the 4. I think that's the right play, just straight up. At this point in the game, obviously, it's a very basic thing. Gives him the frostbite and says, well, what are you going to do from this point? And he's going to pitch a Mavrian Skies and generate some... Did he generate a rune? No, he's just pitching to pop that out there, yeah. Throwing out the Rosetta Thorn for 2 and 2. Let's see how he chooses to pitch and block this remaining arcane damage. 2, 2, and 2 coming across. Gonna have to get rid of some stuff here.
Oh no, definitely. This is going to be a one of those junctures where creative accounting is going to be important. Now, the beautiful part about this Winter's Wail is that, frankly, you can pressure decently with just 1 blue ice card in your hand, or any blue, frankly. Swinging for 4 again on that break point can be dangerous, especially when your opponent is at 1. Right, at this rate, it doesn't matter if it's ice or not, because on hit effects is not just a frostbite; it's a trip to the semifinals.
Yeah, I think if you want to take or if you want to keep a card in your hand here, I think the only way that you can actually keep a card in your hand, though, from Yenwei's perspective, is to go to 1, which is horribly dangerous if you can't actually do anything. So he may, and I think he's probably just going to have to drop to 2 as well, which is very awkward, based on the Rosetta Thorn pushing to 2 arcane in a lump that you can't deal with. So no matter what, he's going to be taking damage, and you're just going to have to get rid of cards from hand, swing with like the hammer, hope that they brick into something, and try to wrestle control back. But you're going to have to deal with arcane damage, and at this point in the game, you need your opponent to sort of brick to a certain degree with your hand, so that their 1 life is being threatened in an awkward way. But
this is that really naughty math that you have to really parse out properly, as frankly, 1 misstep here, because going to 1, that Rosetta coming in for 2 arcane, it's a package deal, and the arcane boots is only going to block 1 of them. You'll have to rely on your Crown of Seeds to absorb the second iteration, or the second sort of, the second half of that 2 arcane damage.
That's correct.
As it stands here, the benefit, however, of going to 1 is that you've basically, for the rest of the game, turned off the skull cap, as Ming Chen here does have 1 more durability on the skull cap, so there's still a block for 1 if necessary.
Yeah, I was incorrect in assuming that Seeds had blocked that first point of arcane coming from the earlier play, but because that arcane because the Crown of Seeds was up, it allows him to keep a 2-card hand and jam down an attack, which is actually great for him if he can rip cards here. I can't quite make out which Autumn's Touch that is, though.
I'm trying to read as well. I feel like if it's just a blue, it may have been better just to come in with your Winter's Wail and pocket a card and allow your Crown of Seeds to be an option for the second one. But if this is a red, then I mean 7 over 4 is many more cards, especially if your opponent might be caught with 2 blocks in hand. It's completely possible. They are floating around in there. It makes it incredibly awkward. I mean, at this rate, anything that trickles through is tough, and it's not, Yenwei's not playing with any combat tricks. There's no attack reactions floating around. It's purely just all muscle.
Yeah, it would be fantastic if we had that giant die right now, so we could see which this is pushing for, because we can't quite make out the color. That being said, looking like he's feathering towards a 2-card block from hand, which can significantly hamper. Oh, and look, the giant die comes in for the MVP. It was a 5. Everyone get hyped. Giant die is back. But a 2-card block nonetheless, because of course, if you take any point of damage, you're dead. So blocking 5 here, leaving yourself with 2 cards. How do you put together enough threats as far as split damage to put your opponent down completely? Is what Ming is trying to figure out.
My thought process in that case is you keep a blue, you create a rune chant with your grasp, and you swing Rosetta for 2 and 1. Right. And that might be awkward enough to create a situation where your opponent has to give you 2 cards,
Sure.
right? And in this case, this is where I'm thinking that, I mean, to me, a 4 is as good as a 5. And I mean, maybe he's just, I don't know how many reduced to rune chants were left. Maybe there was one left that he decided that, but even then, he'd have to pitch for it because there's no rune chants on the board. I still feel that pitching blue and maybe pocketing one of those 2 cards was probably a better move here. Just swinging with hammer, keeping the arsenal going.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, 5 over 4, obviously the 1 extra damage is the game if it manages to trickle through. So there's certainly, a lot of logic in going through with that 1 extra push of damage and just, saying that, okay, this might, I don't want to say win you the game. Blocking 5 is perfectly feasible here, especially since you still have the skull cap. That might be what the thought process here is as well. It's just blocking with the skull cap, and the 5 is keeping into account the skull cap as well.
It does, yeah. If you're swinging 4, then you can do a single card block with the skull cap from hand, and you're just comfortable. Here, pushing the 5 means you can't really consider that skull cap block, and just dropping a card, which puts you on a 2-card hand, and or puts your opponent, I should say, on a 2-card hand, and then they have a lot more stuff to do. And look, he's going to pitch away the Become the Arcanite to make the rune chant, as you had talked through, and I think this is probably one of the only like big lines. Oh, he's going to push 4 and 1 with the meet and greet. 4 and 1 is asking for multiple cards, and looking at the hand for Yenwei, it looks like he's got a couple of options as far as attack actions are concerned, but a break ground and technically the Winter's Grasp blocks for 3, but the break ground blocks for 2. I think that's an evergreen that blocks for 2. And so this is actually an awkward spot to be in. That's an exposed to the elements as well, which is an instant that doesn't block at all. So he's in a little bit of an awkward hand position as well. Man, Absolutely. This game going back and forth, sort of balanced on that razor's edge like you see so many games of Flesh and Blood be.
Meet and greet, again, coming in at a 4, that nasty break point, that's going to be a 2-card block if necessary. Ultimately, unless Yenwei is comfortable, there is perhaps a situation where he wants to go to 1 and start pressuring if necessary. But again, without any fuses, it's incredibly difficult. So just gonna write it down. I'm gonna, going through, taking the 1 arcane damage, if I'm not mistaken here.
Yeah, and
it's 1 all.
This steals away the ability to block one last time with the Arcanite Skull Cap. And again, it's that late game capability to just throw it out there and take the block, or to block arcane damage, is what we've seen in previous tournaments with balancing that skull cap life total. In this case, it's just being able to block with like an advantageous scenario where you can block with 1 card plus the skull cap. Now this is committing 2 cards every single turn from now till the end of the game, because you're at 1 and your opponent's at 1. You can throw that out there and say, give me 2 cards.
There's an unmovable in Ming Chen's hand, and ultimately, obviously, it's still 2 cards to block if necessary. But I think what occurs over here is that unmovable just gets pocketed every time. You just swing perhaps with your Rosetta and call it a day. But I think that right now, Yenwei is incredibly happy that he was just able to go ahead and drop something in the arsenal. This is just 2, the old-fashioned way, the way Grandma used to do it.
This is a dangerous moment, because as far as Chen is concerned, this play right here, playing out, it feels so bad. I can't quite make out what the other card in his hand is, but he has pitched away the unmovable, which also, by the way, just doesn't feel necessarily super great in Arsenal, unless you are up against some fused stuff, which could possibly be the case, or just a big attack. This feels so bad, just pushing a 2 and giving your opponent like a 3-card hand plus an arsenal. A very horrible moment, and you're just hoping that
this is the second cycle too.
Yeah.
There's that pulse, and there's that crippling crush.
Well, I believe, didn't he shuffled off the Awakening, so they were all mixed up anyway, but these cards are still in circulation, as you're mentioning, and he's just going to jam down the Crippling Crush and say, well, you better have Arsenal to defense reaction. You pitched 1 away on your last turn. If you don't have 1 now, it's game. And we can imagine that he does, right?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's not a second unmovable in Arsenal. I mean, it would be nice for him to have it, but again, you need to have a blue in hand. That'll block 8 of the 11, and then you need another card to
Right.
block the remainder 3. You're on the cusp here. Check out these life totals. It's 1-to-1. This is as close as you can get to, these games are insanely close. These Viserai versus Starvo matchups, it is an unmovable in there.
So he had a double unmovable hand, both of them reds as well, which is why it felt so bad. So he is going to play the unmovable down.
Oh no, it's an entirely red hand.
That does, I believe, full block it all, though. But it means that you don't have anything to return volley with. You're just going to say pass. You have no way to arsenal a defense reaction. And it literally comes down to what your opponent does.
So no ice either. There is a flash there, if I'm not mistaken. So there is a potential for a go again here. There it is. So 2 attacks coming through.
Flash into Evergreen pitching. Evergreen, probably a blue Evergreen, but we can't quite find out until the giant die comes to our rescue, drumming down.
It's a red
it's the
one.
7. I think this may just close it out because following this up with just about anything is gonna do it. Pushing that 4 damage there, pitching away the last card, saying, "Give me your last card," pushing it over the top. For the win is Yin Wei on Starvo, and the only Viserai making it into the top 8 cut is out in the quarterfinals. But oh my goodness, was that a fantastic game. Absolutely.